Today we are talking to Chris Jerard, the Chief Brand Officer of Outside Interactive. For those who don't know Outside, it is a brand that has gone from a legacy print magazine and evolved into an interactive multimedia platform and network that touches everything from training apps to long-form journalism to mapping tools. And for folks who don't know Chris, he is one of the people working in the background, shaping how millions of us experience the outdoors. Not just on the trail necessarily, but by ensuring the stories that define outdoor culture today are served up on the right platforms and done so in a way that it helps create access and protects these spaces. Chris has spent his career at the intersection of storytelling, brand, and strategy. He got his start as an intern at Rock and Ice magazine while he was going to school for writing at the University of Colorado, to eventually being a founding member of Freeskier magazine. What I appreciate about Chris is that he understands both sides of the equation. He understands the business realities of modern media, and he also understands the cultural weight that outdoor storytelling carries. When you're at the helm of content for a brand like Outside, you're not just telling stories, you're influencing how people see public lands, how they see themselves in those spaces, and who feels invited in. That matters more right now than it ever has. Chris and I have crossed paths in the outdoor industry over the years. We've had parallel conversations about representation, growth, responsibility, and the tension between inspiring people to get outside and protecting the very places that we love. That tension is something that I care about very, very deeply. The balance between sharing wild spaces and keeping them wild, the role media plays in shaping participation, and the question of who gets to tell the story of the outdoors and who gets centered in it. So today, before we get into public lands, women in the outdoors, content marketing, and all the layers of what Outside has become, I want you to really get to know Chris, his path, his perspective, and the thinking behind his title. So I want to kick this off with a tough one for you. For folks who don't know who Chris Jerard is, how would you describe him?
That is a tough one. I think for the purposes of this conversation, on a professional level, because I'm a dad, a husband, first. I have two little kids, a 3 and a 9-year-old. So that is a kind of my main focus, to tell you the truth. But then on a professional level, I'm someone that really loves to be part of this outdoor community and loves to bring it together, as much as I'm able to do that. And I have a really deep conviction of a life's work of trying to inspire people to get outside and to adventure, and that's what lights me up, and I want to try to share that. It's been a great privilege in my life to be able to travel places and grow up in outdoor spaces, and I think the world would be a better place if more people spent more time outside. So that's really what my work is now, and that's who I am right now, to answer that question. It's what I try to do with my family. It's not always easy to get kids off screens, for instance, and we can talk more about that stuff.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you try to get people on screens for a living.
Well, that's a interesting kind of tension that you're bringing up. In fact, what I'm trying to do is inspire people to participate in being outdoors more. And the medium of the day, like it or not, in how you reach people is through screens. Really doesn't work to reach them with snail mail, billboards, all of the ways that maybe media existed in a different time. Screens are the way that we reach people at scale. Yeah. And so, that's very true, that I am trying to get people to pay attention and engage through screens, but hopefully the message inspires them to get off of screens and to get outside.
I was just kind of giving you shit, but
No, but it's a true thing. I mean, it's an inherent, like, well, how does that work that, the work that you do in the case of Outside is a lot of what we do is based in, mapping apps and storytelling. And yeah, people do that on their phones, the event that I work on, which is kind of what I work on day to day, is very different though. And in that way, right? We are actually just trying to get people to come and be in community for, 4 or 5 days.
well, I'm excited to talk about that here in a second. But, I think that description of yourself was great. I think that's how I see you. And you're really a North Star for a lot of folks who work in the industry. And for those who don't know you, you're really leading the charge for a lot of us. So from the days when I met you, when you were at Freeskier, over the years to where you are now as, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the Chief Brand Officer. You're previously Chief Experience Officer and VP of Marketing over there at Outside.
That's right. That's the day to day now. Yeah.
Fancy.
Yeah. It's a big job. It's a good job.
I think most people know what Outside is, but for, folks who don't know Outside or who are maybe less familiar about it, can you tell us what Outside is? Is it a media company, a tech platform? Is it an ecosystem of media outlets?
Yeah, it is an ecosystem of brands that help people get outside. That is what Outside is in a modern sense. Of course, I think many of your listeners probably know Outside Magazine, which is one of the brands within Outside Interactive's portfolio. And all of these brands work together in this beautiful ecosystem of inspiring and activating and connecting people to get outside.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, for those who maybe are a little more familiar with Outside and who've been longtime followers, you have gone through a pretty major evolution over the years. And I, being in that industry, I think I'm tracking, but, for folks who have no idea the scale and scope of kind of that change you've gone through, could you give us a abbreviated timeline to show kind of, how Outside has evolved over the years to make the impact that you're talking about now?
The modern iteration of Outside is Outside Interactive, which is the grouping of brands that I just, Ski Magazine, Backpacker Magazine, Yoga Journal, Climbing, Trail Runner, Run, this, a lot of active lifestyle publications that in most cases, once upon a time, were magazines. And in all cases other than Outside Magazine are now, digital distribution brands. Outside Magazine still arrives in your mailbox. And we love that. And there are still people that want print. And I think that the brand of Outside, being a 40-plus-year-old brand that has always been there inspiring, people to go on adventures and travel and get outdoors. And you think of the John Krakauers and, the Sebastian Jungers, those stories that are all went into being films and part of pop culture almost. All of that comes from that legacy brand. And there's a lot of that brand, that DNA that is still inside of the building at Outside. And there's been a lot of other extensions, over the course of since 2020, basically, when, sort of through that COVID time period, a lot of things were consolidated in the media space writ large, not just in the outdoor media space. And Robin Thurston, our CEO and founder, found a lot of these brands at that time in a place where they were ready for acquisition. Many of them were in a distressed state, not all of them, and brought those together into this ecosystem that is really this flywheel of inspiring through storytelling, activating through our mapping apps. We have Gaia and Trailforks and MapMy, all of which are world-class platforms in terms of tracking activity, whether that's mountain biking or just taking a walk with your dog, or actually navigating in wilderness areas. And then, of course, all of the storytelling from all those brands I mentioned. And then we have events, like Outside Days, the music festival that we've been going into our third year. And then, of course, the legacy of the Warren Miller Film Tour, which travels around the country in over 100 stops historically. And, from 7-year-olds to 70-year-olds gets people pumped to go skiing. So that's, that in a brief description, we have all of that under one brand now, which is just simply Outside. And the mission is to actually help people get outside through all of those things. Like, that's what we aspire to do. That's it. Just get people outside. And if going back to, our history, Molly, like where I got into outdoor media through, and initially I was an intern at Rock and Ice magazine, and then was on the founding team of Freeskier. And, very in my sort of younger years, very focused on, I think, the athleticism and sort of the edge of what was possible in sort of physical, sport within the outdoor space, right? And now, and I think there's a couple things that have converged. One, the world itself is being held more and more indoors. Like, there are just some crazy stats about, like, the average American kid spends like 7 minutes a day outdoors. That's less time than, like, legally you have to give people in a federal penitentiary, right? So we are imprisoning ourselves indoors because these screens, as you mentioned earlier, are built on top of the most advanced engagement algorithms ever created, in the history of mankind. Like, we all know what it feels like, I think, to like find yourself like, wait, what did I come on here to do? I'm on Instagram and I've been on here for 20 minutes and I actually just came on for one thing that I forgot what it was. They're so powerful, right? And they're powerful in a lot of ways. They can be powerful in good ways and bad ways, as we all know. That is a different thing for all of us than it was when I started my career. And so I feel more passionate about the requirement for, like, the humanity to simply go outdoors than I do about, like, I don't know, deep powder skiing, right? I still love all that stuff. I am actually more focused on how do we remind people that the connection with nature and the earth and being outdoors and each other is actually uniquely an important part of being human. And then if you want to get rad, fantastic. Like, I'm all for it, but first you got to, like, leave your house.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big theme and a through line through a lot of the conversations that I've been having is connection. I was very excited. There's a lot of things that I'm excited to chat with you about that I'm sure we won't have time for. But before we get really deep and start talking about AI and mental health, you kind of started jumping into what I'm really excited to hear. Before the big titles, you started as an intern to get into this industry. And I think there's a lot of folks who, are clamoring to get into the outdoor industry or, are interested in, what you do. And, how, I'd love for you to share your pathway. What got you here?
Yeah, I did my first foray into outdoor media was as an intern at Rock and Ice magazine in Boulder. I was a student at CU at the time. I didn't necessarily know exactly, what I wanted to do specifically. I moved from the Northeast. I grew up in New Hampshire to Colorado to ski. that was my passion. So I have a little bit of a history of, identifying something I really love and then kind of saying that's what I want to do, and kind of everything else doesn't matter so much, and just kind of figure out that one thing. And then what I found is that has led to other opportunities. So the first thing was I love to ski, and I moved to Colorado to ski. That eventually led me to going to CU, and I was an English major, and poetry actually was my emphasis. And towards the end of that time, I was very into it. I was very into writing. I guess I actually was like, I was going to be a writer of some sort, right? Like that was going to be the professional pursuit. And then I started thinking, like, are you going to be a poet? And I had always kind of had side hustles, business side hustles, like painting houses or lawn care, or, finding ways to pay for school. And so I had a business sense, I guess, like on how to go out and do sales, to whether it was painting someone's house or mowing their lawn or whatever. So these two things kind of converged, and I was like, what am I going to do after college? And I went back to, what do I love to do? Okay, I love to write. I love skiing. That's what I came here to do. I want to work for a ski magazine. That was where I started. And so I would say, like, from an advice perspective, if that's what you're asking, one of the things I always tell, young people who are coming up is the hardest part is first deciding exactly what it is you want to do. Right. So if you can write that down and say, this is what I want to do, then the next question is, what are you willing to sacrifice to get there? And in my case, it was like definitely money. I was willing to sacrifice money, right? I was willing to take unpaid internships. I was willing to do whatever it took to give myself enough experience to be valuable to someone who would pay me to do it. And that's how I found myself in a place where I joined the founding team of Freeskier. There's all sorts of stories on how that happened and how I met those guys. But it was not by mistake. I knew that I wanted to. I actually still have the rejection letter from Keith Carlson on trying to be an intern at Powder. I tried hard to get internships and staff positions there were only, and there's fewer now, obviously, but there were like 6 ski titles, snow titles at the time in the like late 90s. And I wrote and called every single one of them, to try to find my way there, and eventually found a great home at the very beginning of Freeskier. And then I was there for 10 years, building that.
It's interesting how a lot of folks that I talk to have a similar story. Like even I came up in snowboarding, and my dream was to work in the snowboard industry. When I figured out that I wasn't going to go to the Olympics, I'm like, how can I work in this industry? Because I wasn't that good at it. But, I had written like almost every snowboard company. And when I moved to Seattle, I was like, I want to work for Snowboard Connection, SnowCon. That was, the spot to be. And if they didn't want me, and this little company called Evo was like, okay, let's do it. And you know what? I got to carve out a space for myself and be a part of something really beautiful at that time. And it's cool to hear that, you went through a very similar experience. I think that's a very common thread too.
There are varying theories on this, but my experience has been finding the thing that you love and has a purpose behind it for you, that you're willing to do a lot to try to get in and to be part of that. And there are other theories that you shouldn't follow your passion. You should get technical and figure out, keep your passion separate from your work. But I've been really fortunate that my work has always been very integrated into my passions and who I feel I am and what my purpose is. And that has been really satisfying for me, and it's certainly at the beginning, as I said, it doesn't come without a sacrifice, right? Like the sacrifice early on was, I think I made $18,000 a year the first 2 years at Freeskier. I had to paint houses on the side at the same time. And I mean, that was actually after I was already on staff, so it took a long time to get to a point where the convergence of having like a normal living and that living being something I loved, it took years to kind of sort of get to that point, but it was worth it.
So yeah, there's people who ask, would I do it again? The same way, after everything I've been through. And, there were hard times. People have seen me cry and see me on the floor, like pulling out my hair. And, I would a million times over, I'd do it. Now in hindsight, right? I learned so much and it shaped who I am today. Yeah. Have you ever listened to How I Built This?
Yeah.
Oh God. My favorite part is I think in almost every episode, there's a moment where the founder's on the floor crying in their kitchen, calling their parents, asking for $30,000.
Yeah. I mean, that was later in my, Freeskier. I didn't even understand that Freeskier was a startup, to tell you the truth. Like that's what it was, but it didn't, I was coming in from the creative side, more on the photography and writing side, and eventually became the publisher and was more involved with the business, very involved with the business. But it wasn't until I actually like went out and raised capital and, that feeling of being the sole founder of something is different even than like joining a founding team. So I feel you on that.
Okay, so I want to zoom out for just a second. So, for folks who maybe are less familiar with like how companies run and how Outside, of course, runs, can you talk about what a chief brand officer actually does? Like, what are you chiefing over? What does your day-to-day look like, especially for such a unique organization, Outside?
Yeah, fair question. As you said, the evolution of my titling at Outside is that when Outside acquired my companies in 2021, I came in as a vice president of marketing effectively. I think there was a couple different titles, like specific to audience development or something of that nature. But really, I came in with a breadth of knowledge around how to create content and reach people through social media and through storytelling and through creators. That was really what my companies were, creator marketing based companies, Inkwell and Realm Media. And so I came in really from a marketing perspective, right? And over my time, I've been there for over 4 years now. And through that time, the impetus of this event called Outside Days, as a really a marketing event for Outside to bring people together around the brand itself and to try to demystify what is the new Outside. And that was the initial mission. And that led to chief experience officer. And that job was about, creating in real life experiences like Warren Miller and Outside Days that bring actual human beings like eye to eye in one way or another around inspiration from the outdoors, so that's skiing or in the case of the music festival, music, and then all of the other brands that we represent, from yoga to climbing, all on one site outdoors. From a brand perspective, the chief brand officer, really that role is about creating cohesion. And I think operationally within Outside, and then more importantly, my opinion on brand is a great brand is one that is understood first and then trusted as a result of that understanding, right? And so my job is to create understanding as to what Outside is, and then have people trust that in one way or another. Trust it from the perspective of reading a great story that makes you go, I want to go to that place. I want to travel to that place outdoors. I want to participate in that activity. And the source of the information being Outside ultimately should help with that because it's a trusted source, right? So ultimately, the job of a chief brand officer, and it probably varies from company to company, but for us, it is about creating that trust and understanding. And then internally, we have all of these. We have 30 different brands, all the way from technology platforms to legacy media platforms to a travel platform, a SaaS platform that you can book your trip through our outside travel platform. How to bring all of those leaders together around what our mission is and our belief. We have a strong belief that time outside is important, right? That it's essential to human health and happiness, and that we live in an increasingly isolated sort of indoor world. And so part of it is to get everyone that works at Outside to align around a belief, and then this mission of like actually moving people from screens, right, or some message to participating in the outdoor world. And that's where our slogan "Get Outside" is something that all 450 people at Outside understand and know. And that's my job on a day-to-day basis, is to remind people of the foundational aspects of like why we work here, and that our job is to create sort of customer trust so that we can achieve our mission.
Thank you. That was actually really powerful. And I'd imagine a lot of it sounds really sexy at first blush, right? But I would imagine a lot of responsibility and weight comes with that role, with things like AI, mental health screens, access. I'm sure you are having to carry a lot of really tough decisions as well. And I'd like to kind of, AI is a big one right now. I'd love to. I know you probably don't want to. We kind of started our preamble off talking about AI, and I'll be honest, I use it on a daily basis now. I try to be responsible with it, but you talked about trust. I think people understand for the most part what Outside and your properties are all about, but it's scary right now with AI and what you can trust or not. Can you talk a little bit about the conversations you're having?
I think every organization is, if they're not talking about how to use AI, prepare for changes in society, then probably somehow blissfully disconnected from what's happening in the world, right? Like, I'm sure maybe there are some that are not, but certainly that's a base part of the conversation with anything that touches technology right now. And so we, on an executive level at Outside, we have created AI standards, and we are figuring out, as is every company, how to use AI to amplify our efforts on a basic human level, right? Like, how can you use it every day, right? Once you start to understand how to use these tools, whether you're using Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, or how advanced you may or may not be with it, like, there are a lot of great ways to speed up automate it and processes, right? So from an operational perspective, my team, my team is brand and experiential. I have 15 people on that team within the larger ecosystem of Outside. We use AI for the kind of automating tasks, I would say, right? How that translates into, how AI shows up in our public facing work, I would say right now it doesn't, other than it amplifies the human beings that are doing the work. And we have very strict standards around our journalism in terms of AI or use of AI, as does the New York Times and the Washington Post. And we have those same standards at Outside, and in fact there have been instances of us having to take action around those aspects. So you take it super seriously. Back on that level of trust. It is a massive question in terms of how humanity will be using AI, and how do we relate to that. I think for us, the thing that I get excited about with, because it's easy, I think, if you even take a step out, from the outdoor business, or from media, and it's an unsettling, some of even the stories this week about how fast AI is moving and what it could mean, for jobs. And, I think there's a healthy amount of unease around it, and, what to trust, what not to trust. I think that, in fact, back to that idea of understanding and trust, for outside, we have the advantage of our product ultimately is the most authentic thing you could imagine, right? It's the outdoors. It will not change, right? From that perspective. I mean, that statement could be taken out of context. There's climate change, there's all sorts of other, but that it won't change from the standpoint of that, from a biological and earth level perspective, getting outdoors and connecting with other human beings in the outdoors is one of the most authentic things you could possibly do, right? And it is kind of divorced from the effects of technology and AI to a certain degree, right? And that's where we're kind of leaning into, right? We're leaning into, this is an essential part of the future of humanity. It's been an essential part of humanity in general, but I think we have all certainly taken it for granted, because it used to just be survival. Then it was, we're creating more leisure time and more comfort, and it's easier to stay out of the elements, right? And now it's actually a luxury and a privilege to be able to go out and ski or climb or hike. And I think we're entering into a time right now, which is why Outside Days is such an important part of what I do, where connection with each other and connection with the outdoors at the same time, like that is a magical combination that I don't want to say that AI doesn't matter, because it still will have effects on everything we do. But look, when you're, on Sunday night, you're watching Cage the Elephant this year in Denver, surrounded by 19,000 other people who love to be outdoors and listen to music. AI is not in the picture, it's really about that connection and in real life, and trying to get people to remember that is something that is really important to humanity. And then if you want to go down the rabbit hole of like getting people off of screens and kids off of screens, there's a lot to talk about there also. But at the base level, it's really about inspiring people to activate their outdoor self and then connect with other people. And that is truly like our flywheel. Like we have decks that say like inspire, activate, connect. And all of our products and our brands fit into that flywheel to try to move people to that action.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think about mental health. We've evolved from having to be in the outdoors for survival. Then we moved indoors and we're like, yeah. And, now we're only indoors, and it's, a luxury, as you said, to be outdoors. And I think it's an important balance for mental health and, that disconnection, but also connection with people, in the outdoors is so powerful. And, before we talk about access, I think there's this kind of funny juxtaposition where you think about like AI is, having a massive impact on, or potential massive impact on the outdoors and our wild spaces and the environment. And, there's this other aspect of, how we keep wild spaces wild, right? I know that's been in the media a bit about influencers, because of social media and, talking about all these really cool places that we love and we want to share. It has actually led to some, net negative impacts on the environment and some of these spaces. Do you bear a responsibility, or do you guys think about that, at Outside? Do you have any wisdom, or things that you're working on that, other media companies, individuals, influencers, just humans, could consider?
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting tension that you bring up. I tend to fall on the side of, I think the larger crisis is people not getting outside, I think, of course, impact on wild spaces is something that we've written about a lot. I mean, there is not a publication or a media company in the world that's written more about conservation and wild spaces. We've recently actually partnered with Republic, which is Chris Kai's new media platform also, and it's all about public lands and conservation. So just generally, like, because we're trying to encourage people to get outdoors, we have a deep sort of respect and love for trying to protect those spaces, right? That's just kind of the cloth we're cut from. The people who work there care about these things. When, you ask specifically, like, do we bear responsibility for, like, overuse, right? No, I wouldn't say with it. I feel that that's something that outside is bearing responsibility for. I think we have to be responsible in the content. Content needs to be responsible in telling people that this is how you recreate responsibly, all from leave no trace to more modern kind of approaches. Molly, one of the challenges we have in the world right now is people don't read, right? Yeah. So, you got to tell these stories in really entertaining ways with video and through creators and the creators that we work with. We do look at them through that lens also, in terms of, have they been responsible? What is their message? What is their personal brand? These are all things that are definitely considered. I think that social media in general, should inspire people to get outside. And when we see instances of, like, irresponsible use of the outdoors, which I think there's certainly been plenty of stories about, kind of in particular, like the influencer thing, right? People, kind of mobbing beautiful places and in a way, diminishing their value for others by doing that. I don't, that's not nothing to me. That's disappointing. And my hope is that we as a species don't do too much damage as we evolve and learn. And that's part of what I think Outside is trying to do, is to if you make people love it truly, and yeah, I guess make would be the wrong word, but if you help people inspire them to really understand the value of the natural environment, then, generally people start to care, and they start to look a little bit more deeply into, how do you preserve these places? What do you do to get involved? Maybe you're even inspired to that level to contribute to a nonprofit that does this kind of work, whether that's like Protect Our Winters or Conservation Life. There's so many great organizations that are doing work where people have dedicated their lives literally to protecting, our wild spaces. I think our job in that ecosystem is more on the top of the funnel, to inspire people to start to care about it and to go, oh, wait a minute, like, there's a whole community of people at different levels of their journey with their relationship to the outdoors. And, we are, the biggest in the space on that level, right? Like, we reach the most people. We're trying to bring those people responsibly into caring about, the outdoors. And the first part of that is the simple statement, like, get outside, like, start with that. And then we hope that people find their way to protecting and caring and conserving within that.
Well said. Yeah. It's interesting for a lot of the brands that we've worked with. And if we have influencers or ambassadors, there's a simple code of ethics, for those folks, similar to Leave No Trace, that we expect them to hold themselves to and, kind of pass muster. And it's interesting if, I wonder if there's a way to encourage or inspire a larger code of ethics, much like Leave No Trace, for folks on digital platforms in these wild spaces, So,
I think there's a story, and there have been stories that we've told about that. And I think it should be a continued story. It's like, not every beautiful spot in the world needs to go viral, right? Like, and I this is an old conversation actually. That's just, you know, I mean, I remember listening to a debate between my friends, Paul Nicklin and Chris Burkhardt, who have who actually have two different perspectives on access, right? And are both incredibly prolific and successful in showing the world, you know, beautiful remote places. But they have different perspectives on, you know, who should be able to go to some of these places, right? And so I think it's an ongoing debate, and one that Outside will continue to cover, right? And I think our job sometimes is to promote the question and make people think about it.
Yeah, access is a big conversation. You know, I want to kind of pivot a little bit. You know, women in particular. I'm a woman and I'm a person of color, and I think have largely been underrepresented in the outdoors in a lot of ways in the industry, but then also at the athlete level. You know, do you guys have any initiatives or, you know, ways that you help steward or kind of bring people in to the outdoors in a bigger way?
Yeah, since I've been here at Outside, it's been a big part of you know, back to the kind of the building of the brand, is that we believe in, and this is inherent in that slogan, "Get Outside," is get everyone outside. And we've done a lot of work on trying to make sure that the representation of women, people of color, is woven naturally into the coverage that we have, right? From the people who are on the cover of Outside, as a, you know, kind of flagship, to the stories that we tell, to the creator network that we have built, you know, mindfully looking at that and saying, you know, how are we representing all people, has definitely has been part of the conversation around marketing within Outside for as long as for the 4 years that I've been there, and there's been a lot of action to that. We now have officially a nonprofit foundation called Outside Community Foundation that raises money for nonprofits, that really does try to actually put funding into some of the nonprofits that are doing a lot of this work. That is probably the best way for us to actually affect, other than the stories we tell being looked at from the lens of, hey, are we telling the same story that's been told for 50 years about, you know, excuse that I call this a cold white guy thing, right? Like, basically guys who look like me who are man versus nature, and those stories sometimes are super inspiring. Don't get me wrong, but also just as I'm speaking solely for myself right now, not for Outside, but like, I think those stories are pretty boring and tired right now, and there is so much more texture and so much more interesting stories to be told that are more inclusive, right? And so, as an example of how we kind of weave that into the work, when we talked about launching this South by Southwest of the outdoors, this idea of like a global gathering, which you know, was Outside Festival, now we call Outside Days. The first thing we did is looked at our values, and we said, okay, this has the potential to be kind of a big sprawling event and business, and sometimes if you don't have your values figured out, they can sort of evolve based on what is good for the business, and that's not a great way to run something, in my opinion. So we started with like really nailing down, okay, our values are creativity, inclusivity, and sustainability. Just three huge tents under each of those, and so to touch on the inclusivity part and the actions that we took around that, we created a community engagement council within Denver that has all sorts of groups that are from what we call in Denver the inverted L, which is sort of a socioeconomically, you know, depressed area around downtown. It's an area that is harder for people to get access to the outdoors, right? There's just issues with access, I would say, that much of Denver works on consistently. But we went out right after that and said, well, how do we get tickets to those folks? How do we make sure that we figure out bus routes to the event itself? And we worked with VF Foundation on that kind of work. We worked with a whole host of nonprofits, from Adaptive Adventures to Big City Mountaineers to, a lot of great, again, folks who are have been doing the work for many, many years and are doing a great job of it. So when it, comes to that part of like, that's the thing I've been working on a lot for the last few years. We've very mindfully, like, how do we make sure that this is accessible to everyone in all of the underserved groups, and how do we make it so that those groups and those communities feels very welcome and know that they have a place here and can be in their own community, but also like, this sort of Venn diagram of all the communities in one spot around this idea of getting outside. And I think there's still a ton more work to do, Molly, but I'm proud of the work that we've done around Outside Festival, Outside Days in particular. Like, if you look at the content that's come out, and I encourage, you and your listeners to just, look up Outside Days, go look at some of the videos. I've been in this business, outdoor media, for 30 years. Far and away the most diverse, just textured, beautiful gathering of humans in the outdoor business that I've ever seen, right? Just much more representative of what I think actually the outdoor community is, and trying to tell those stories and make sure that everyone feels very welcome, in that space. That's the area that I have had the most influence on, is the events. As it relates to our editorial, I know that that's a big part of how we look at things also, and it's super important. It's at an executive level. It's a conversation. It's why we started this nonprofit, so that we could lean more into that work in the future.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea, so I'm really glad. Thank you for sharing that. Quick question. Have you seen, because when I got into the snow industry, late 90s, early 2000s, there weren't a lot of women. There wasn't a lot of ethnicity within the outdoors in general, but, in particular snow sports. Have you seen that? Where are we at right now? Are you feeling like we're making progress?
I think
as an industry as a whole, I guess.
Well, I first would say I think there's a lot more work to be done. And I feel like my time in this industry, if you go back to, as I mentioned, like to where we were in 2002 when I was at Freeskier, and how women were often portrayed or included, I certainly would say we've made progress since then. Yeah. That might be because the bar was kind of low, honestly. And like I said, I still think there's a lot more work to do. However, I look at, I think like the last 3 covers of Outside have been women, amazing people, like outside of them, the amazing athletes, people who are just doing things that are at the absolute limits of human potential. They happen to be women, and I think it's great that we're telling those stories. I think that there's been progress, and I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. One of the areas, again, when I think of actually to give you real tactical moves that are considered and made when we look at how we build, for instance, our panels at the industry conference for Outside Days. Very important that we have representation on those panels. It's too many times I think we've all been to these industry events where, oh, surprise, surprise, it's 4 white guys up on stage, talking about something that might be very interesting and very important. But also I think we can do better to make sure that, and I have learned a lot through my mentors who are women, who are yeah, I won't be on your panel unless there are other women, right? We need to work on that in general. That's going back decade plus. those kind of like messages. It's that I've internalized to when we look at how we show up. I think it's really important to consider, are we speaking to all of the communities that, and of course, including women, that have the need and requirement to get outside, right? And that's all people. So it only makes sense. I do think it's still, as I said, like there's a lot of work to be done, because for whatever reason, it still sometimes does feel difficult to make that happen, right? Like it's just obviously that's coming from me. So like there's an inherent, I have an inherent position that makes it so that I have to work harder to make sure that there's representation, right? And my hope is that continues to evolve. I think it is evolving. Again, I think that there's a lot more work to be done, but we do look at it. It's not just lip service. Like when we sit down and we look at a panel, when we look at how we put things out into the world, and we're internally very self-critical. We've done some things even on this marketing push around industry conference. Like we've had hard discussions internally. We're like, we kind of messed that one up. Like we could have done better in terms of how that came across. Like what is the message that we're sending? So it's a constant evolution. I'm not going to sit here and say we're doing like, the best in the world at it. But it is something that is very, very considered and very important to us at Outside. And we have some incredibly strong and awesome female leaders. That's part of it. My boss is a woman, right? And she's a total badass. And I think that's helpful, in terms of how you make sure that you show up in the world when your leadership is more diverse from that perspective.
I love hearing that you guys are prioritizing it and it's on your mind. I know it takes time to make large shifts in an industry like this. So, and I know you don't speak for the entire industry by any means, but it does give me hope, to hear that it's a priority and it's on your mind and you have direct initiatives to focus on it. And, I want to be conscious of time. We've been chatting for about 50 minutes here, and you've talked about this thing, Outside Days, a bit, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to give it a good plug for folks who have no idea, who've been hearing you kind of talk about it, but who have no idea what this thing is. Let's say I like to use my mom in these examples. Like if you were to describe it to, say, my mom, who's an 83-year-old, I think she's 83. Sorry, Mom. How would you describe Outside Days?
Well, first I would say it's the physical manifestation of everything we represent at Outside, right? And it's the global gathering for people who love the outdoors or people who are curious about the outdoors. It's an incredible music festival with a lineup that's absolutely world-class. 3 days of music, 16 different bands who are handpicked for the fact that they put on incredible live shows. And it's the kickoff of summer in Colorado, one of the best places on earth to be outdoors. I'm biased. It is the South by Southwest of the outdoors. Films, there's a film festival baked in. There is an industry conference baked in. There is an ideas festival baked in. We had Alex Honnold and David Blaine and Diana Nyad all last year on our main stages doing talks, in addition to all of the music and kind of the festival that you feel on the site. We also have like 100+ brands that exhibit, that bring experiences. North Face, for instance, brings a wall, like a climbing wall. We have a kids area. We have a culinary area. I mean, it is truly, in every sense of the sort of vision, a festival of the outdoors and a summit for the outdoor industry. We have a big vision to continue to make it the center of the outdoor universe at the beginning of the summer. This year it's May 28th through May 31st. Usually it's going to be that first weekend in June, basically. And it's a place to see all of your old friends and make a bunch of new friends, and have a really good time. I mean, it is a very good time.
And where can people learn about Outside Days?
Outside Days is outside-days.com. That's where you can find it. And the lineup is there. You can buy tickets. You can look at the entire lineup that we have booked so far for speakers. Films are forthcoming with a partnership with Mountain Film and probably some other exciting announcements around that. All the information's right there. And, this is going into our third year. We had 36,000 people that showed up last year.
Oh, wow.
We expect more this year, right in the heart of downtown Denver in Colorado, easy to get in and out of. Actually, 25% of people from last year came from out of state. So we welcome all of our non-Colorado folks to come in and mix and mingle with the industry and also just with some great culture, food and drink and music all in one place for a few days.
Now, I've missed it I've missed it, and I'm excited. Hopefully I can find a dog sitter, and I'm going to try and make it out this year.
You got to get out, Death Cab for Cutie, Goth Babe, Japanese Breakfast, My Morning Jacket, The Flaming Lips, Dawes, Cage the Elephant, Tosh Sultana, Group Love. That's just some of the music. These are world-class bands that sell out Red Rocks and stadiums. So it's going to be a big party of the outdoor world.
I cannot wait. It sounds amazing. I have a random question, for folks who, it's an outdoor festival. Is there camping or van life parking?
It's in downtown Denver. So the short answer is no. There's no on-site, it's not like Bonnaroo or a reggae festival from that perspective. But there is, within 25 minutes of Denver, you have all of that. I mean, you're in the hills. So there are, and it's actually a great point, Molly, we should probably put some of that up on the website as to where you could park, or where you could camp if you wanted to camp and then come in. Gates open at 1:00. So, there's plenty of time to camp and go for a hike in the morning and then still make your way into Denver for the kind of the big festival. So that's a really good point actually for outdoor people. Where if you were to fly in, where could you go and camp outside of Denver? You don't have to go too far. Yeah.
I'm thinking of making a road trip out of it. And I was like, man, if I'm going to be out there, I want to experience the outdoors a little bit. And I figured it probably starts later in the afternoon. So, so you personally, Chris, what's next for you? I mean, it feels like you have found this, beautiful place. You're at this incredible company and you are, serving a really big mission that must mean a lot to you. What's next for CJ?
It is such a privilege to work on this event. It's a privilege to work on this brand in general. What's next for me is a continued work on the things I'm doing here at Outside. I mean, the brand work is, I love it. I love, trying to bring that idea of trust and understanding to life. There's a lot of meat left on the bone, so to speak, Molly, in terms of what I'm doing here at Outside. The vision for Outside Days, really is to be that South by Southwest on a global level. We want to see 100,000 people in Denver for Outside Week, where there's a mix of both the industry and culture, right? And so that is a beast. I mean, building that, there's a lot of time left to really bring that to. I don't feel like I'm in a place right now at all where any of the projects I'm working on are even half done. There's a lot more to do. Beyond that, as I mentioned at the top, I've got a 3-year-old and 9-year-old. So that's my main project every day. Right. And that's a ways, before I'm out from taking care of young kids, that's still a good decade or so. Right. So what's next for me is continuing to build out the Outside brand and Outside Days as an event. And then trying to be the best dad I can be, which is actually incredibly difficult on a daily basis.
I love hearing that. It's fun to hear how people describe themselves or to talk about what's next. And it's usually career driven. I think people forget that they're human. They have lives outside of their careers. especially in the context of these conversations. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, why do we do it? I mean, ultimately, I really hope that my kids can enjoy time outdoors and that they find it's given me so much. For me, it's given me my career. And for some people, that's not the case, but it still gives you so much. These times outdoors, whether that's just going for a walk with a friend, or it's going down the Grand Canyon, and it can be epic or it can be small epic. And I really I want to pass that on, to my kids. That's super important to me. And along the way, I'm hoping to pass that on to like millions of other people. Right. That's the big vision, is to actually help people get outside at scale. If I can do that, I guess, like when you say what's next, what's next is actually to have a big impact on moving people into the outdoors as you said, like in a responsible and fun way. It doesn't have to be like going to, the crazy viral spot. It literally can just be like getting outside with a friend and going on a walk. That's how simple it's become.
I just got chills. Thank you so much. I've been learning, now that I'm no longer an owner of a business and I'm trying to find more balance in my life. I've been looking for those small moments, and, you just took everything that I've been trying to recreate in my life and summed it up. So thank you for the work that you do, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so good to reconnect with you, and I really hope to see you. That's what I love about that event, is I get to run into people that, I've had the real fortunate privilege of working with and interacting with over so many years. And it's like this great excuse to invite everyone I know to come and be together. And, it's like a reunion, and also the ability to meet new people. And I really do think this event in particular, the things that come from the event ultimately will be more important than the event itself. The connections and the ideas and the partnerships, and, the great cliche, right, is like, oh, we met at Outside Days and then we got married and, now we have children, I think I really do believe that that's possible when you have a cultural event that becomes important. It kind of births other really amazing things. And I think that that's totally possible. So hope to see you there, and you invite like 10 of your friends, and that we all, you get to spend some time together outside.
Absolutely. You just, food, friends, music, being outdoors. Those are my favorite things. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. We'll see you out in Outside Days.
Yeah, get outside.